I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for being here, being in attendance tonight. We are going to have a few audibles on some things that have come up, so bear with us as we go through these. Roll call.
We'll go backwards. Van Hook.
Here.
Parchman.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Vorse.
Here.
Hudson.
Here.
I don't think none of those here.
No.
Small here. Foney.
Here.
Carney.
Here.
Lotz.
Here.
Albrecht.
Here.
Mylard.
Here.
Rosenberg.
Present.
Thank you.
Here backwards, but I don't know how to.
Huh?
Since you read them backwards,
I thought it'd be a change of pace. Did I miss you or something?
No, you got him.
I was going to
Even though you went backwards, you got him.
Don't pick on me, Jerry. Come on. Yeah, you know,
Okay.
I might start in the middle next week.
Okay, you all received copies of the minutes of our January 29th meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Before we get into any of the items, at this point in time, I'll open it up for any public comment. Those who come forth, if they would please give their name and the ward that they're in, if they represent a company, the company that they're in, and we ask that you present this to the whole council, not to any individuals or individuals in the audience, and that you do so in proper respect. This is his business meeting, so if anybody has handout material, if they will please give that over to Walter, he will see that that information is dispersed appropriately to everybody. So is there anybody who has any comments at this point? Yes, sir.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Jeff Poignier. I reside at 115 Sawgrass Lane, located in the Forest Hills Estates subdivision. Mr. Rosenberg is my alderman for Ward 1. We built the house in 2005, and the stormwater drainage issues since then have become worse due to the changing landscape of the properties around me. We have made numerous attempts to solve the issue. Unfortunately, we've not been able to completely resolve the stormwater drainage issues. We have contacted our alderman, who has been out to look at the issue. City engineer John Nolan has been out to look at the issue. The developer of the subdivision, State Construction, is planning to come out this week and take a look at the problem. Schmidt Excavating is also planning to come out this week to help look at possible solutions. I would like to encourage the Public Works Committee and City Council to move forward as soon as possible with their research, development, and hopefully establishment of a stormwater assistance program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing or hearing any others online. We'll move forward with a couple of things. One, I received a call today that unfortunately Chris Monroe is going to be stepping down from the council. He is moving out of his ward. So if anybody knows of any candidates who you think would be good candidates, if you could get me their resume, I will interview those people. My plan is to select within the next 45 to 50 days to have a candidate selected to submit for approval to the council to fill till the next election period, because I believe that seat comes up for election come April of 2025. So Chris informed me he was sad to have to do so. So if you have any good candidates that you think would be interested, please let me know. I know that we have some people who have to leave tonight. Matter of fact, there are some people who are not here tonight because of some school activities that are going on at some of our schools, and we have a couple of our people who are going to have to leave because there's activities over at the high school. These are some honors nights, and so they don't want to miss that with their children. So we're going to move on into it, and I do have another item that we will bring up after Jeff has had to, after he has given his presentation. Matter of fact, we talked about the stormwater. That is one of the things that Jeff's going to give an initial presentation on. So unless there is anything else, Jeff, I'll ask you if you want to go ahead with your presentation.
Yes, Mayor. So want to have a discussion on the Stormwater Assistance Program. This is a presentation that was presented at the last committee of the whole. I unfortunately was unable to attend that, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, the first few pages, but the last page is the one I want to spend some time discussing, and that's kind of how we would potentially fund it and move forward. So first thing I wanted to share is the criteria that the council's established on how we prioritize stormwater projects. We have projects identified within the capital improvement plan to address all of these categories except for item number 5, and that's erosion that's threatening private property. I guess you can add erosion or flooding to that matter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, we all have projects identified. We're moving forward with them, executing them. It's the 5th one that really there isn't any criteria set up, no funding in place to move forward with those projects. So. And partly the reason behind that is the fact, based off our stormwater maintenance policy, states the city does not maintain unimproved ditches on private property. So anytime there's a drainage way that's existing prior to development, if there's no improvements being done to that, the city's not taking over maintenance and jurisdiction of that. It's remaining with that private property owner's responsibility to do that. And a lot of these issues we've seen through the years are cases like this. Majority of them are erosion along creeks, whether it be Ingle, Ogles, or unnamed tributaries to those. Another thing I want to touch on is where we've gotten with the implementation of the development manual. So a lot of these issues we're seeing were places that were developed long before our current development manual was in place. Since that time, we've established riparian corridors along these major drainage ways, which prevent these type of issues in the future. So, you know, based off of this, you're not allowed to even develop within, in a lot of cases, 200 feet of the flow line of a creek. Most of these areas we're seeing these erosion are much closer than that, and they were permitted long before this development manual was in place. So I guess the only good thing to take out of that is we're preventing these from occurring in the future. Now it's a matter of how do we deal with ones of the past, potentially. So next slide shows quite a few different drainage assistance programs at other communities in the area, mainly St. Louis metro area, and then some throughout the state of Illinois. How they're funded, what percent they're funded at, how much is funded per project. I also provided website links if anyone wanted to go on and look at this in more detail. Just kind of pulled all this information to give us an idea on where we start at, and if we were to develop a program like this, what would be appropriate funding levels. So that's just information to share there. So really, again, that brings us to this last slide that, you know, is more of a discussion issue, and I have some ideas and thoughts, but wanted to get the opinions of the council and have a discussion on it. So the first question is, what types of projects should be eligible? You know, we've heard a lot about stream bank stabilization. So erosion that's occurring on private property. We just had the gentleman get up and speak about yard flooding. That's another example, I think, would be two items that would be eligible if we were to create this program. Where it goes from there, you know, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it could be a fluid program that, depending on applicants and what comes in, we can adjust the criteria. But I think at the onset, these are probably the two major items that we would want to address. And I'll stop on each of these. I mean, any comments or thoughts from anyone on the council on that?
Just a comment on that first thing, when we talk about what types of or projects. I think there are some where we've had some untoward results from development. Somebody just missed the mark on how much water was gonna come off or when or whatever. The homeowner is caught in the middle of those, and I think those need to be considered in there as a little higher priority perhaps than some others, particularly where it's been a commercial development that has caused greater runoff than was expected, particularly during heavy rain events. And particularly what's foremost in my mind right now is Misty Valley, and what's going on out there. I'm sure there are others, that are similar, or there will be at some point. We're almost sure of that. But I think those where the homeowner had nothing to say about it is done to them. I think those need to be at one of the higher priorities in this process. One of the other projects that we see is where again, Misty Valley, where the original developer didn't do his homework, and we have a dry sump designed to be a water detention area that who knows where the water's going, it was supposed to go in. But those kinds of things exist around town. Of course, we hear routinely about others where getting additional water in a stream that, as a result of development. So I think those need to kind of float to the top, if you will, because it wasn't something that the homeowner participated in, just happened to them. And so I think those, we have an additional burden to address those.
I have a question. Back at the January meeting, Jerry Albrecht stated that at some point a study had been conducted to identify some of these areas, and that a plan, like a draft, was created, but it was never actually adopted. He thought it was maybe about $28 million fix per se. Are you aware, do we have something, and is it outdated to the extent that we should have a better understanding based on current stuff?
So there was a stormwater master plan that was put together that was really remained in a draft form. It mainly addressed issues within public right-of-way, streets, locations like that. It identified a number of projects that have been since implemented and constructed. There was, if I recall, there was a survey associated with it that any citizen could go on and state whether or not they've ever experienced flooding at their personal property. But I think that was about the level of it. It didn't then go further and go, okay, well, this person said they had flooding on their property. Let's go out and examine that. It was just a real general type of survey that was done.
Sure.
And again, the plans were dealing more with improvements within the public infrastructure, not private as much.
So do you have a sense that we have data other than anecdotal about what the extent of some of the projects are?
I mean, to be honest, to come up with, if we were to put this program out, how many applicants could we potentially have and who would be interested in it? I wouldn't even care to guess a number that we could get to. So, that's something we need to think about, is if we're going to fund this, at what level and at what amount, because without knowing who's going to apply and for how much, it's difficult to do that. So.
Sure. As somebody who has an analytical strength, do you prefer, when you're crafting a policy, to start it small, see what comes in, and then build it from there, or open it up, see what comes in, and then craft it more fine-tuning after that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to start with, if you'll call it like a pilot program of some sort that's smaller, that, we can answer those questions. How many applications come in? What are the types of projects we're seeing that are more popular that they're submitting for. And then from there, maybe we can adjust and change the criteria and the policy. And ultimately, if there's a lot, we're going to have to come up with some sort of scoring criteria, or you do what others have seen that I've heard. It's just first come, first serve. As soon as it opens, you get an application in, you're first in line, you get the money. Until we see how many applications we have, I don't know if we can answer those questions.
Okay. I just wonder if it's worth, I mean, I don't want to do anything that's going to delay some, I mean, I sense that there's support on the council to do something, and I don't want to delay the ability to do that, but I wonder if it's worth a 2-week open period of collecting information to see what type of stuff comes in, have some preliminary data to say, okay, it looks like it's not a lot of yard flooding, it's mostly erosion in the backyard or creek stabilization, those type of things. But, all right, thank you.
So to Jessica's point, I think we can probably do it somewhat like at least start, or it's an idea anyway, like the facade improvement program. We'll do X number of projects each year, and then kind of a first come, if we say we're gonna do, I don't know, 5 projects per year, we weigh the 5 that are actually, houses are flooding, or, we have that same kind of priority system going. My other part, will you go back to the slide where it's got the priorities? I think it was the second slide, one more down, you passed it by 1. So right there, you've got highlighted, the city doesn't maintain improvement ditches on private property, but the last part of the last sentence in the one above that, any other type of improvement installed by the city or installed by a developer reviewed and approved by the city. We know that we've got some areas before we had this booklet where some developments came along and flooding occurred after the fact. We weren't as aware that we were gonna, we approved this project is gonna cause some other flooding. I think that needs to be stressed, that those two don't necessarily parallel each other. The other part is there are some people who have spent on their own thousands of dollars for their, to fix property, their own property, to try to do something about this. And they're at the point that they feel like, and Mr. Poine's one, that, he's had 5 different contractors or more out there to do different stuff. And you can see, if you go out there, the improvements that he's made. He's not just somebody hoping the city comes to rescue him. So I think that somewhere in the process, that probably needs to be considered as well. If we're going to throw money at a program and on private property, which we haven't done before. I agree with you. I think there's support. I hope there's support. If we're going to consider beautifying people's landscaping, I think where there's been damage to property, and Mr. Pointy is probably, he has had water, so the top priority on our list, he has had a foot of water in his basement, and they rectified that on their own. They didn't know they could reach out for help, so just let that be known as well.
Jeff, I got a quick question about the other communities that participate in funding of some sort. Do any of them have a line of credit where a resident that say he wants to spend $30,000 could go to a finance source and borrow? Do they have anything like that set up in the program where somebody could do that, or do you know?
There's none that I'm aware, but I didn't get in detail and ask those questions.
And the other problem you got is if Bob and Betty decide to improve their portion of the ditch, but if Linda and John and Tom and Susie don't participate, that section's going to wash away. So you have to kind of do this, and you have to kind of get a group together if you're going to work on a big project probably to do that.
I did have a conversation with the staff member at the City of O'Fallon, Missouri, who administers their program, and he said they've had success with one-off, if you will, stream bank stabilization projects where only one resident goes in and does the improvement, and it's not adversely impacting the neighbors. In a lot of cases, what happens is the neighbors see that, they learn about the program, then they maybe apply the next year, and it kind of can snowball from there. And But having to do a whole stretch at once, I don't think that's something that at this point we'd want to put into the program, because I think you'd extremely limit your applications at that point.
I have a quick question, just because it's been referenced, and this is more probably for Justin and Grant, but I just want to make it very clear that the residential facade program that we talked about a couple meetings ago, that and this program would be two completely different buckets of money. Okay, I just want to make that very clear, and so people don't confuse those two as the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, that was really the next question is, what is the maximum funding amount? Not only per project, but also annually, I guess, for the program, right? I mean, we were just in here last Monday where I talked about a project being substantially over budget that we're having to take additional reserves from to do. And those are projects, again, identified in our CIP. So if we're implementing a program like this and we're going to fund it to whatever level, that's less money going to those CIP projects, which could change the schedule on those. So you got to be mindful of putting money into this program may adversely limit what you're able to do with your other projects. So, so just, that's to think about also. And then to Ross's point, the initial thought was you set it up similar to the commercial facade program that's been done downtown. The criteria on that are maximum reimbursement, $15,000 up to half of what the property owners put in. Is that feasible? Can a private property owner on the residential property afford $15,000 for their share of a project if it's a $30,000 project? And that's some other considerations to take into account.
Yeah, I think what Jeff is trying to do is to put out some things, not anticipating we're going to come up with a final decision tonight, but just need to get everybody thinking as to what type of program, what we want to do, to what extent, and so forth. And it's going to take some time and discussion to work through this to get it developed, because in many cases, I think Jeff will be able to share with you that there are some other problems in some areas that are causing it that are not necessarily, that are caused by actions that are taken by the homeowners in some of those areas, or the lack of action taken. So all of that has to be discussed and put forth when you're looking at developing. I think the idea is good, but it's going to take some time for this council to flush it out and do what you want to see accomplished long-term. Jerry.
Jessica mentioned the stormwater survey plan that was done, I don't know, probably 15 years ago. The value of that thing was it identified where the problems existed at that time, and it provided kind of a roadmap. And I've asked a couple of times for a map of that original stormwater plan showing which areas are the problem areas, and then what projects have been done to try to ameliorate the results of those flooding in those areas. And I think you'll find we've done a pretty good job of solving the problem. You have to be careful about, you need to go back to where it starts, because if you go to the end and try to fix it, then you create problems back upstream. And I still haven't seen that thing, and I'd love it. And I think for a public relations thing, that'd be a great thing for the city to put out, because every year we spend, I don't know, $500,000 doing that kind of stuff, and we don't get credit for it. What we get is when people come in here and complain. So they don't understand that fixing the drainage problems at Smiley and Jefferson and that area up there solved a problem downstream. So anyway.
True, you're right. Eric?
Jeff, and I don't even know, this probably predates you quite a bit, but is there any way that we could create a timeline for the council? I had the benefit of being with the city for a while, so I know there have been complaints over many years. can we at least highlight maybe when some of these complaints started, what the city's actions were? Just because I think the big thing for all of us, or at least for me, is it's hard to say what percent and what amount we would give without knowing what the applicant pool is going to look like. But maybe if we could look at just the concerns that have been expressed that we're aware of from the city side of view, that might give us at least a little bit of a window or perspective of if all of these people came forward, some of them may have been fixed. And I think it's important too that we do know if the city is not necessarily culpable for where it ended up, then that needs to be explained too. So I don't know how it was tracked before you, but if we could kind of take a look at what's out there and what would maybe be coming forward, that might help gauge the direction the council may want to go. But I think you guys are just as involved, or hopefully from what I've heard, wanting to address it if we're culpable, trying to figure out how to make it right. And as you said, I believe we are making it right going forward, so.
Yeah, and I mean, we can look through historical records that we'd have potentially in CityWorks, where anytime someone would call in and a service request was created and someone went out to observe a drainage issue, we could try to pull that data just to get an idea on the level.
That would be great, because I think what we'll find out too is that the claims that the city staff has done nothing or the city's done nothing, I think in CityWorks you'll find out at least some of them that were Public Works related have been addressed and have been fixed, as you guys talked about the presidential streets. So it just, I get it when people are upset because it impacts their property, and I would be the same way. But at the same time, I do think we need to highlight these are all the concerns that have been expressed to the city, and this is how we've approached them. And whether it's private property or you know, it's a city or off private property issue.
Jeff, I think you have a map that you have shared before of the projects that you have worked on as it relates to stormwater. That might be helpful to just bring it back up.
Yeah, that map is online. It shows projects we've completed and also projects that are planned over the next 5 years in the capital plan.
And
But
the
again,
fact,
those are more publicly funded ones. So if we're trying to look at private projects, you know, we can research service requests that have come in to see what data is there.
and then also you have what you have out on the 5-year capital improvement plan, where you, I think, basically have doubled the amount for stormwater that's spent over the last 5 years.
That is correct.
Just one last quick follow-up. We've had over the last year a couple residents come and claim that the city hasn't filed proper paperwork, or they've reached out to somebody, you know, different federal agencies or government agencies, which appears to not be totally accurate. It would be helpful at times, at least for me and hopefully other council members, if they may have a perception or perspective of what they heard. But I think at any time the city is being accused of not being compliant, we should do our due diligence to show that we have been doing exactly what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I'm referencing our MS4 permit, and all of our last inspections that's administered by the EPA shows we are following all the standards and completely compliant in that permit.
Jeff, can you remind us how stormwater accounts are currently being funded? Where does that money come from?
So it's really a combination of streets and Prop S, but I'd say the majority of it is being funded through Prop S. For the most part, all the capital projects in the streets are mainly our asphalt overlays and concrete replacements. So almost entirely all the stormwater work's being done through Proposition S, which is the half-cent sales tax.
Thanks.
But then that's also supplementing some of the pavement management program, because we haven't been funding that enough through streets alone. It's also doing all the reconstructing and paving of all the presidential street type projects also.
Okay, thanks.
There's no other questions on that item. Jeff, do you have anything further on that, or do you want to move on to the next topic
Yeah, no,
you've
we'll
got?
keep working on that, and as more
And
develops.
Jeff,
we'll
you're going to work
share.
this through the Public Works Committee, is that correct? That you're going to keep working on this and getting feedback and everything?
Yep, yeah, we can,
And then we'll share that with the rest of the council as to what's taking place with that.
correct. Okay. The other item I want to discuss tonight was the Pierce Boulevard traffic calming update. So this was an item that was discussed quite a bit going on about a year ago, really related to the amount of cut-through traffic and speed that occurs on Pierce Boulevard. Back then, we did a study, found that about half of the traffic on the road is cut-through traffic that's going from Greenmount to Lincoln or vice versa. So we've come up with a plan to implement some traffic calming measures, but before we did that, we went out and gathered some baseline data to use to compare our temporary measures against. So back in September, we set out 8 devices that measured volume of vehicles and speed, and those are shown on the map for you. It provides the number of vehicles per day, and then the second page shows your speeds. So it shows your maximum speed, 50th percentile, 80th, and 95th. So with this data, we can deploy these temporary traffic calming measures now, gather the same data while they're in place and compare them and see what measures work the best, what slows down traffic, what maybe defers people from using it as a cut-through. So what we're planning on doing beginning this week is beginning to deploy these temporary measures. And right now we're just looking at putting them west of Walnut on Pierce. And it'll be a combination of 2 speed humps and curb bump outs that are they're delineated with raised reflective markers to emulate kind of like the curb coming out and narrowing the road with the intent to slow down traffic. So, and again, these are speed humps, not bumps. They're drawn out for a longer duration. I think they're 10 feet in length, and they raise up at a much less grade than traditional speed bump. Plan would be to deploy our message boards and letting people know that there are temporary traffic calming measures ahead, to use caution. There'll be signs at each side of the speed hump saying that it's there. And once it's in place, and probably in place for about a week or 2, we'll redeploy those counters to gather the same data with all those in place. And then what I like to do after that is pull up the speed humps and just leave the curb bump outs and gather that data again, and then have a real good baseline to compare what helped, what didn't. Also, with us not placing these east of Walnut, it will give us that data when these are in place to compare west side to east side at the same time also. So right now, we met this morning with our streets foreman and operations managers to get these deployed this week, weather permitting. Again, there'll be message boards put out to notify the residents going through there. I anticipate them to be in place for about a month while we gather this data. After that point, they'll be removed. We'll take then that time to analyze that data, determine what the best final improvements could be to try to slow down traffic or deter cut-through traffic in that area.
Question to Jeff. And Jeff, you'll also, the question was asked, I know, at one of the meetings about this, and that is that you're not doing it to the east side of Pierce, but then you can compare what the differential is between the before and after with the testing with speed and the before and after on the west side with the speed, and show really what truly had an impact.
Yes, correct. And then ultimately, any final improvements that would be permanent, we'd implement throughout the whole corridor of Pierce. It wouldn't be just limited to this west portion. But this is really just to give us some data to analyze.
Anyone else have any questions on that?
I have a nosy question. In your data, which I can't read it very well, what was the average speed?
So on Pierce, your 50th percentile speed, 26, 19, 16, 26. Your maximum speed in some spots were as high as 57. But
wow.
Again, your average speed is right at about the speed limit currently, based off the data that was collected back in September. If we put these measures in and we see that this average speed doesn't really go down much, I guess that's going to be a discussion. Is it worth doing these, what will be very expensive permanent improvements, see what the outcome of them are. If it's not really reducing your average speed much, is it worth that investment?
Well, and in addition to the speed, does it deter some people from using that as a cut-through?
Yep. Yeah, that'll be the other question.
And we're not trying to deter the average, we're trying to deter the 57s and the 50s and the 45s.
Yep.
The ones that put people's kids, dogs, grandma, grandpa at risk.
Any other questions for Jeff? If not, I know Jeff needs to head out. Unless Jeff's got something else, he needs to head out to the high school for some honors assemblies over there where some of the other people are going as well.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Hold on, Jeff, just a minute. We'll have a question period at the end, sir. Okay? Thank you. All right. Okay. Before we let Justin give his presentation, several months ago, as a result of the 2040 plan that was put together, master plan that had some items in there about the 15-minute city and different things that we were going to be working on that came about over about 18 months and talking with about 1,700 people. It drew interest of a lot of different people. There was several magazines here in the U.S. that published it. The some of the local TV stations published it. There was an international magazine that mentioned O'Fallon and published the forward thinking in the plans. But most recently, the NBC affiliate from Chicago visited several communities in looking at new developments and how people were looking forward. O'Fallon was one of those. They came down here. Grant, how many days did they spend down here? Couple, 2 or 3 days. They were down for about 2 or 3 days, I believe, and talked with a number of people. They talked to people on the street. They talked with Walter. They talked with myself. And just recently, it was put together and broadcast up there, and we just received a copy of it. We thought we would share it with the council tonight, and then Walter will be sending that out in the FYI later, so everybody will have a copy of it. Are you ready for it?
Welcome to O'Fallon, Illinois, a suburb of St. Louis, a population just under 33,000. There's an Air Force base and a rich history in coal mining. But lately, the city is gaining recognition for a designation shared with the likes of Paris, France, and Oxford, England, a climate-forward concept called the 15-minute city. In part 2 of Global Climate Local Impact, we're looking at examples of how municipalities in the Midwest are adapting to climate change.
It's small town
The
living.
music is something else.
Yet everything that you need is here.
How long have you lived in O'Fallon?
All my life. I do like that it's close to everything.
A lot to do, a lot of trails, a lot of walking, a lot of parks.
Everything's within range of what you need.
I think the thing about O'Fallon is what it has developed into. It came from basically a railroad and mining and farming community, and it has transformed itself into a medical and retail center for Southern Illinois, and has developed into the fastest growing community in Southern Illinois. My name is Herb Roach. I'm the mayor of the city of O'Fallon, Illinois. I guess we bugged the community for about 6 generations. My great-great-grandfather started the first family business back in the 1860s, and Route 50 was a mud road at that time.
What is a 15-minute city?
The 15-minute city was brought about by saying, okay, we have some very nice residential areas, but we'd also like to have some of our businesses within walking or bicycling areas. to our community so that commuters don't have to get into a car.
So really, everything you could need is here?
That's what we're working towards, yes.
Cities should be designed or redesigned so that within the distance of a 15-minute walk or bike ride, people should be able to live the essence of what constitutes the urban experience. To access work, housing, food, health, education, culture, and leisure.
As you're growing, you're trying to keep sustainability in mind with this master plan and with your 15-minute city designation. Why is that so important?
How do we handle, like if you get a 4.5, 5-inch rain in an hour's time, how does our stormwater handle it? You know, 40 years ago, people didn't think much about stormwater planning. Now we build more into our stormwater and we continue to develop further so that we can handle things like that. How is the construction of our homes? How do they need to change as we see changes in the climate? We had over 1,700 people over an 18-month period of time give us input, and then our businesses, as to what they wanted to see our community look like 20 years from now.
My name's Walter Denton. I'm the city administrator for the city of O'Fallon. I am hired by the mayor and the city council to run all the day-to-day operations of the city. A lot of the conversation was around being able to have connections between parks and schools and different other city facilities, and they wanted a way to make it easier to get around the city without having to drive in their cars. We've received about $4.7 million in grants of ways to keep traffic moving smoother so you don't have as many emissions, and a lot of those are like roundabouts. We've looked at ways of our drainage calculations and ways to detain water and have better stormwater regulations so that have as many issues with heavy rainfalls that we tend to get more now. Housing was a big issue also, and we wanted to put in there that we wanted to be able to provide housing for all people at all income levels or stages of life. I think there is a byproduct of a 15-minute city where if people don't drive as much, then you won't have as many emissions.
So you're proud of the progress thus far, but still some work
So
to do?
far, it's still early, so we're hoping that we'll see some more of that coming in the future, but we're encouraged.
Do you think this model could be shared with others? Do you think other towns and cities will pick up on this idea after seeing what you've done?
I hope so. It's more about being friendly and welcoming and just people enjoying their community and being able to enjoy the different amenities in the city, and anybody can do that.
Do you hope that the idea spreads?
I think other cities will definitely pick it up, and you know, we're early into our stages. All in all, I think it's a good program for us, and it's going to help move our community forward. So we thought we'd share that with you. Like I said, Walter will be sending that out, but that's something that has been broadcast by the NBC affiliate there in Chicago. Okay, Justin, are you ready?
All right, so we are beginning to wrap up the Forward 50 project that has been ongoing for just about a year, and so we are trying to now take the information that we've gathered over the past year, and we begin to identify public projects that the city could look to implement over the next few years. And so what we're asking and what we asked at our final open house last week was to help us begin to prioritize these improvements. And so staff came up along with the consultants and East West Gateway with 12 potential projects. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because they're pretty self-explanatory, but I've given you all kind of the presentation. What I would ask of you guys, and you don't have to have it done tonight, but if you could get them back to me by next council meeting, which is May 6th, what your top 3 priorities would be. So we'll go through all 12 of them, kind of think through them, and identify the top 3, and then we'll begin to put those together. Yes, Mayor.
Justin, when they go about looking at that top 3, there's 2 different ways that people could look at these top 3. What is the biggest project, or what's going to make the biggest change right away, or and do it that way, or what are some projects that we can move on immediately and start showing that we're making the movements forward, where the larger projects are going to take a little more time with gathering the funding and so forth. Am I correct on that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, funding will be one piece of it. Getting it through the IDOT review and approval process will be another piece. So, I mean, these things aren't going to happen overnight. They're going to take some time regardless of what we do. But certainly, yeah, the roundabout at 50 in Lincoln is going to take a much longer time than a potential, crossing of 50. So, but yeah. So the 12 projects that we've identified is one of them being a continuous sidewalk along both sides of Highway 50. This is a little bit misleading because the next 2 are actually going to be looking to put a shared use path on the north side of Highway 50. So this would definitely be more about filling in the gaps, at least on the south side of Highway 50, to ensure that there's at least a continuous sidewalk along that corridor. The next project would be a new shared use path on the north side of Highway 50 from Community Park to the Metro Recplex.
Justin, can you clarify the difference between what a shared use path versus a sidewalk is?
So typically when you look at a shared use path, those are 10 feet wide. Typical sidewalk, they'll range between 4 and 5 feet wide. Yes.
I also wanted to just clarify that we can vote for some of these, but we have no idea whether IDOT's even going to say yes or no.
Generally speaking, we've passed these by IDOT. They all should meet their codes. That was the premise that we walked into this project with, is that don't design something that IDOT won't approve. It may be a battle to get through, but the task at hand was to design improvements and provide improvements that IDOT would approve.
And IDOT had staff here at most of those meetings.
Yeah, and IDOT's been involved in the process throughout. The next one is a new shared use path along the north side of Highway 50, and this would be from Community Park to Greenmount Road. The realignment of Eagle Drive. So there's a little bit of oddity between the Sleep-In and IHOP that you can kind of weave your way through private parking lots to get to Eagle Drive, which then connects to Talon. So there's an idea out there to actually make that a public street and allow for better kind of secondary access instead of always having to be on Highway 50. Additional westbound lane from Highway 50 from Greenmount Road to State Street. So we've been looking at this with the development of the Spring Hill Suites Hotel, adding a lane through there. And then if you go across Greenmount Road, continuing a second lane all the way till that full second lane picks up right before the spur. So this would allow for additional queuing on this segment of Highway 50. There's been times where, if you're out there in the afternoons, Highway 50 can back up clear almost to the Dollar Generals at some point. So adding that extra lane adds that capacity and should allow for more traffic to move through that area. Another potential projects is a realignment of Fifth Street. Where Fifth Street currently comes in at the Gators location, it creates a really bad angle. The dairy being there, it's now shuttered its operations, but an opportunity here to create developable lots as well as get Gators some actual parking to help them with their business model as well. Obviously the big one, roundabout at Highway 50 in Lincoln. This is actually on the capital improvement plan. It is not currently the quickest project. I think our State Street streetscape is the one that's closer to being a potential reality, but a streetscape along Lincoln Avenue from Highway 50 to the downtown district. Another one is a shared use path along Lincoln Avenue between Highway 50 and Interstate 64. This actually, so it was identified in the Forward 50 project, but as we've been working through the bike master plan and, we had groups in for bicycles and pedestrians, and this path actually scored really well with all of those groups. Another one would be a pedestrian crossing at Community Park. This one would take some work with condensing the number of access on the south side, but could allow for a median to be placed in there to allow for safer pedestrian crossing of that road. There's an additional conversations that have been happening with OTHS. Obviously, they purchased some ground on the south side of Highway 50. They're actually also looking at some improvements on the Weber Road side. And so there's been some discussion about creating some type of pedestrian crossing at the Weber access. Again, IDOT has some issues with too many pedestrian crossings here. We've looked at a potential, what would a signalized intersection allow in terms of pedestrian crossings. So that's what that one would entail at this time. So I know that was pretty brief. If you have any questions on any of those, certainly here to answer those. But again, the project open house last week, this was a survey that was put out to anyone that attended. It's also online, so if you want to get more people involved in helping us identify which projects are the most important to you guys and our citizens, would be a good place for them to provide that feedback. Okay.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And please, as he has requested, if we can have those turned into him by next Monday, that would help keep things moving forward then. Yes, sir.
One thing that would help out a lot, at least it would help me, is that you've got projects here that have been identified and they're all great. But maybe we could have a listing of an estimate of the cost and where the cost would come from. And I know some of these, we talked about low-hanging fruit before. Some of these are really cheap. And we could do them without worrying too much about the approval from higher authority, if you want to call IDOT a higher authority. So it would be helpful. I mean, if you think the most important thing about increasing the traffic flow along Highway 50 is to improve the 3 lanes, out west and put a roundabout in there, but if the roundabout costs, what, $5 million? And why should we prioritize that up here when there are a lot of cheap things down here that we could put up there and get done and demonstrate the progress?
Yeah, so the estimating will be coming. They don't have those numbers yet. And so,
okay, well.
And so Jeff and I and the mayor had talked about it, and we just don't, the way Jeff's bids are coming back right now, we used to have a pretty decent estimate on what things were gonna cost. And we're starting to struggle to provide those estimates right
It
now.
would need to be down to the dollar, a high cost, a low cost, medium cost, state funded, city funded.
So I think all of these projects would be available for some type of state or federal funding. Okay, so there's not all that would have to be on the city.
That's an important thing for us to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, sir. At this time, I'll open it up. If anybody else has anything that they want to address the council with. Hearing and seeing none.
Did y'all?
Okay. There we go.
Double time, Vern.
Won't shove it around.
Funny guys here when it says Vern Ware, Ward 3, as you all know. Okay. Jeff's not here, so it's falling on deaf ears. He praised the fixing of the presidential streets. Well, it's only took 56 years to get it somewhat fixed. I'm still having a problem with the 3 drainage retention areas that you have within my block. You got one on East Washington, doesn't get any water at all. And you got one on East Adams at the beginning of the 400 block that gets less water than that one gets. And then you have the one in the middle, which is 3 houses up from me, and that one gets all the water. I don't understand it, and I've been complaining about this for years, but I live on the corner of Adams and Hildegard. All the water comes down the hill from Smiley. All the water comes at me from State and Washington. I get it down from Jefferson. It comes all down to Adams. So we got, as I said before, anywhere from the 12-inch lines that run there, all dump into my corner of one 12-inch line. So we've got anywhere from 4 to 6 12-inch lines feeding my 12-inch line right there on the corner, going down to the catch basin, and then dumping into the so-called retention pond. But if I drive over there and look at the other 2, they're dry. My suggestion, I made it to Jeff, and falls on deaf ears again, there's 2 culverts there on Hildegard and Washington that are running towards my house and neighbors' houses there. I don't know why you just don't shut those 2 off, plug those 2 ends on each one of those, and force that water down in the retention pond there on East Washington. Okay, that's that point. In regards to your developers and all this other problem you're having with them developing their areas, why don't you come up with a plan of the developers have a retention and fund that they set aside so any other things happen as people move in, that they can correct it with the money that they set aside for that, just like you have a detention for contractors when they make their draws on their contracts. referring back to my glorious days of working for the city for 55 days, there wasn't a problem with the workers and everything else. It was a problem with the management. And I know that goes on today with the guys working for the management, for the guys that are hired from the neck down. Okay. We would, whenever the storm warning came out, I worked on the street department, and we would get in our vehicles and go out and clean the drains before these storms would occur. I ain't seen that done ever under who's running the show now. And that was before the storms, and even during the storms, we would maybe have to go out. But just a thought that maybe they might want to go out there and clean the drains, because there's still a lot of them that are not clean. So I thank you for your time, and we'll talk again.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
I just had a couple questions. One, with regards to the speed bumps, if you guys see that those are successful there, do you plan to implement them in other places?
This is the first try at that, and there are other streets that could possibly utilize that, but this will tell us how successful those are, and Jeff does have some in mind, depending upon how successful it is.
Okay, and with that, will that impact like the streets department with when it comes to like snow plowing for snow?
That's one of the things that has to be taken into consideration. Yes, sir. That's one of the reasons they're using the speed humps versus speed bumps.
And then I have a question from a previous council meeting. I don't know if I can ask it now. It's in regards to the old base factory that's being proposed. So they said that they want to serve alcohol, and they're going to put that on each of the vendors inside their food hall. Wouldn't that create a lot of confusion if one overserves and it questions, brings concerns on who has the liability for, drunk people that are in the old base factory?
That would be something that would be considered, sir.
And then what about
Mr. Mayor, I do have an update on that. There is only going to be one vendor that serves alcohol.
Only one to be vendor.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So with the parking, it looks like they'll have probably about 100, 150 parking spots. What's going to stop folks that can't find a parking spot at the park to then take up their parking lot and walk across the street to use the park? You see it already at like Discovery School, and I know they did the no parking signs for the residents on Over Newfoundland.
Those are things that everybody's got a parking lot has to look at.
Sir, can you state your name, please?
Dan Studi, Ward 7.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So, I'm Dave Ricala. We actually live in the same subdivision. So I know there's been discussion about the sale of the Combrink land and possible development. And I know that there's traffic studies going on right now. Is that information going to be posted somewhere for the public to review, to understand when development is being considered, having to deal with that traffic already, whether or not I'm driving or running? Because like you said, it's great being able to, like in the video, get around town on your feet. There's already significant foot traffic and vehicle traffic. So that's one of the things I have concern with.
There is many things yet that have not been put to bed on that concept, so it's really too early. We have not even had enough information that we can even get out to the council at this point. So once that information is available to us, we want some details that we can actually share instead of, oh, this is what that's going to be, and it turns totally opposite. Okay.
Just, it feels like, from our perspective, that there's not a lot being shown publicly, and
There's not a lot to show you.
Right, but it's, I know that there's, from previous history on the other side, that there's only like a 7-day comment period. So we don't want to get blindsided and say, okay, well, it's gonna get posted on this date, but nobody knew about it, and then it's too late.
No.
So,
I can share one thing with you that I can tell you. The first thing that was required of them to do was to try to put together, and the plans that they've originally submitted and what they're working on now, there's changes, and we've also required a traffic study, and that will probably take 10 to 12 weeks, and that was just authorized about a week, 2 weeks ago.
right, and yeah, we've seen the electronics.
So all of that information, we're down the road quite a ways. Okay? Thank
Can
you.
I add some more context to that? When a development is going through the process, so there's at least 4 public meetings. In many cases, there's 5. So there's, the time frame on when that happens varies a little bit based on holidays and stuff, but there's almost always a planning commission meeting, then there's a community development meeting, then there's a council meeting, then it goes back to community development, and then it goes back to council. So I know I remember when I was not an elected official, understanding that process was really overwhelming. But being on this side, I can tell you there's 4 or at least 5 public meetings where.
So how does information get posted to say, hey, during this meeting, we're gonna be talking about.
Everything is posted on the website under all of our meetings. Everything is posted out there with the full agenda that everybody can take a look at and see. And as she had addressed, there is at least 5. It first would go through Planning Commission, then it goes through our Community Development Committee, it comes to the council in full, it goes back to Community Development, and then goes to full council, at least 5 meetings.
Is
Okay.
that process documented somewhere on the page to show how it traverses that process? I'm an engineer, so.
Sure.
Now,
I appreciate the attention to detail.
Yeah, and there's information that will be readily made available. Okay.
I will.
You said, being an outsider, and this
Sure.
is the first time I've ever been
Yep.
here.
I get it. The easiest thing to do is to get on the city's website, and you can request notifications of different communications the city puts
Right.
out. So one of those includes anytime documents are added to our board docs, which is the program used for meetings, you'll get emails every time something's added to that. And the information that we see as council is the same that is put out in public. So I would say I don't recall ever having access to something that wasn't in board docs. Yep.
Because my wife's family, there's 5 generations living in O'Fallon at one
Sure.
point in time.
Yeah.
So, but nobody's ever involved in this side of it, so it's just interesting. So
Welcome. It's fun.
Right. Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Hearing that there is nothing else, those were the last items on the agenda. I do want to remind everybody that there's a groundbreaking at the park tomorrow for the new pool and the other
4:30,
item at 4 or 4:30? 4:30. Okay? Okay, if there's nothing else, can I have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Jerry's staying, the rest of us are adjourned.
Jerry's standing for the
You have to leave the
ground.
lights on.